Hi, everybody. I'm Brittany Lewis, a breaking news reporter here at Forbes. Joining me now is political commentator Chris Cillizza. Chris, thanks so much for joining me.
Thrilled to be here.
I think the big top line from Tuesday's election results is that it was a good night for Democrats, a bad night for Republicans. Now, where the blame's going is different depending on what party you're in. Democrats are saying this is a referendum on President Trump. President Trump saying, slow your roll a little bit. I wasn't even on the ballot, and this has to do with the shutdown. So where or who do you think is responsible for what we saw on Tuesday night?
Yeah, I mean, look, I always think anytime you're trying to put the blame on one person or thing 100% in an election that's as varied as New Jersey, Virginia, New York City mayor, California, right? It's a little bit hard. I do think if you ask me who would I blame the most, I would blame Donald Trump. I think that he is not popular nationwide, 40, 41, 42% of the vote in terms of approval. And he's really not popular in New York City and California, slightly more popular in New Jersey and Virginia, but not all that much. And I would say, especially in New Jersey and Virginia in those governor's races, Abigail Spanberger and Mikey Sherrill, both who won by double digits, ran expressly against Donald Trump and sought to tie their opponent to Donald Trump. I think Donald Trump got elected in 2024 because people, even if they didn't love him, thought he would do a better job on lowering prices, housing prices, car prices, grocery prices, than Joe Biden or Kamala Harris. And I don't think that people believe he's done so. And I think that, what happened on Tuesday is a reflection of that.
I want to talk about the Trump factor in a little bit, but before I do, I feel like this is the happiest I've seen the Democratic Party in a year. It seemed like they have some wind in their sails now, but I mean, these wins didn't exactly defy the polls. Nothing was a shocker on Tuesday night. And a Democrat winning in New York City isn't exactly mind-blowing. I know that the Democrat himself was. However, wins in California for a Democrat measure, not mind-blowing. Virginia and New Jersey, a little bit more. Not even shocking there either because they're blue-leaning states. Do you think the enthusiasm from Democrats, the excitement and saying this is such a good night for Democrats, do you think that celebration is a bit overblown?
I think it's probably a little premature, a little overblown, and totally understandable from Democrats' perspective, which is, look, 2024, I think it is hard to overstate how devastating that election was for them. They thought they were going to win, especially after they subbed out Joe Biden for Kamala Harris, and they did not win. They were a shutout of power at the White House, at the Senate, at the House level, at the governor's level, at the state legislative level. They really didn't have much to latch onto. So when you are in a position like that, you will take any wins, even though Republicans rightly point out the vast majority of the big wins on Tuesday were in places you would expect a Democrat to win. You'll take any wins. Do I think it bodes well for them in 2026? I do. I think what you see is midterm elections tend to be a referendum on the party in power. That party remains Republicans from the White House to the House to the Senate. The Democratic base is very energized, as we saw on Tuesday. The Republican base, less so. Do I think it solves Democrats' brand problems writ large heading into the next presidential election? It does not. And in fact, it reinforced it in some ways. You have Zoran Mamdani, a figure of the left, right, Democratic socialist, win in New York, beating the establishment Democrat, Andrew Cuomo. And then you have two very moderate women Democrats get elected governor in New York and, in New Jersey and Virginia. That's the dynamic that is still at work in the party. It did not get solved on Tuesday. It's not going to get solved even if Democrats have a great night, on November 3rd, 2026. It will get solved in the Democratic primary presidential process that starts in 2027.
And I think both sides of the Democratic Party really emerged and was visible on Tuesday night. With Mamdani's win in New York, he's definitely the more progressive part of the party. Then you see Spanberger's win, Sherrill's win in Virginia and New Jersey, and they are more moderate Democrats. I'm curious, what do you think the winning message is for the party? Because Mamdani, he didn't really focus on Trump and MAGA too much in his campaign. He was laser focused on affordability. On the other hand, Cheryl and Spamberger, they did focus on affordability, but they also spent a good part of their campaigns saying we're not Trump and saying that the Republican who was running against them was tied to President Trump. So what's the winning message for Democrats, do you think, in 2026? Affordability or being against Trump?
I think it's the former. I think it's the former. And yes, you're right that Mikey, Cheryl, and Spamberger did talk about Trump, but they also talked about affordability, right? I think they talked about Trump in the context of this guy said he was going to fix everything and make you be able to afford everything, and you can't. To me, the through line between New York, New Jersey, and Virginia is that affordability message. And it can encompass so much, right? It can, if you're Zohran Mamdani, it can be about that the rents are too high, right? That people can't live in New York City anymore. If you're Abigail Spamberger or Mikey Sherrill, it can be grocery prices are too high, or buying a home is too high, or healthcare costs are too high. So it can really fit into a lot of things. I don't think it has to be an either or. I think the mistake that Democrats make over and over again is to assume that swing voters hate Donald Trump as much as they do. They don't. Swing voters may not love Donald Trump, but they don't hate him. They care much more about which party and which candidate is going to help me in my lived reality, right? And that's why I think you have to put affordability first. That's the key. You can talk about Trump in the context of that, but you can't talk about, well, Trump's terrible, and then affordability. I saw a quote from Mikey Sherrill that I'm paraphrasing, but she basically said, like, look, abortion is an important issue, but if people feel like they can't make ends meet, me talking about abortion doesn't meet them where they are, right? Elections are about meeting voters where they are, not where you think they should be or where you want them to be.
And for the past two elections, it's been about the economy, stupid. And Republicans ran away with that in 2024. That's in large part why they won. Democrats, that was a winning message for them on Tuesday night. So then when you're looking at the midterms, how do Republicans reclaim affordability and how do Democrats keep it? Because that is what's winning here.
It's all Trump. There's not that much Democrats can do. They're out of power everywhere, right? Particularly at the federal level. There's not much that they're going to be able to do legislatively to reclaim, to say, like, we did X, Y, and Z things to make housing more affordable or grocery prices more affordable. And again, I'm not sure they have to in a midterm election. You just have to be the other choice if people don't want the party in power. If you're a Republican, I think you have to hope that Donald Trump, who is not great at introspection and certainly not great at admitting he was wrong, I think you have to hope that he spends the next year focusing less on talking about how great the stock market is. He said this week after the election, everyone has money in the stock market and the stock market's doing great. Well, according to Gallup, only 62% of people have money in the stock market, and that includes people with 401ks, right? So it's not just people who are, trading, it's just people with a retirement account. 62%, which means basically 4 in 10 Americans don't have money in the stock market. The stock market does not equal the economy. The stock market can do really well, and you can still feel as though you are on shaky ground economically in your daily life. I think he has to change tonally, certainly, and then maybe from a policy perspective. He's not done a ton of that in the past in his political career. He just kind of asserts he's right and keeps going. But if I'm a Republican, I have to, I'd be on the phone asking if he would at least consider doing it.
How many times in the past 10 years has someone said Donald Trump needs to change his tone? And how many times have we seen that? So realistically, it seems like he needs to pivot for Republicans to win in the midterms. But does he, and how does he do that?
I don't think he does, because it's exactly what you said. Look, he's a 79-year-old man who's been elected president twice. It's unlikely that at that age and with that resume, he says, you know what, I am not doing things right. I just think he is kind of who he is. And I think that's always been the danger for the Republican Party, because they made a choice to latch themselves lockstep with him. And when you do that, yes, you get the benefits, and they've seen that 2024, but you also have to answer for the less good times. I think it's going to be harder to separate from Donald Trump. If you're a Republican in a swing district, it's going to be challenging. I don't know if they'll try it, and I'm not sure even if they try it, they'll succeed. And I think that's just the reality of a decision they made way back in 2016.
And Republicans, especially Trump supporting Republicans in 2024, got a major boost from him when he was on the ballot. He wasn't on the ballot in 2025, and he's never going to be on the ballot again. So what does that do for Republicans? And does that show perhaps they don't have this strong leader that is on the ballot when he's not?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the real questions, Brittany, after 2024 was, is the Trump coalition sustainable? Can it last beyond Donald Trump? So what was clear is that Donald Trump was able to put together a winning coalition. Young voters, especially young men, Hispanics, especially Hispanic men, white voters, even some black voters, he remade a winning coalition in 2024. The question always is, can that coalition be handed off? Can it be handed to the Republican Party? Can it be handed to J.D. Vance? I'd be more skeptical of that today than I was a week and a half ago.
And so then if I'm a Republican, then what do I do? Is Trump no longer a winning brand in 2026? Do I try to separate? What does that really look like?
Yeah, I think it's a huge question because, as I mentioned earlier, even if you do try to separate from Trump, and there's been almost no evidence that Republicans will do that, I would think, politically speaking, that he's in the low 40s in job approval. His approval on the economy is underwater, meaning that more people view it negatively than positively. He's a lame duck, right? He can't run again. All of those things, if you added those up and we didn't put Donald Trump's name attached to it, just a generic president, you would be like, okay, you have to run away from that person. I don't know if they will do it because Trump has enforced loyalty brutally over his 10 years in office, in and out of office, but as the head of the Republican Party. And I'm not sure it will work because they have latched themselves so closely to him. I guarantee you every Democratic ad in 2026 will try to tie Donald Trump to a Republican candidate and note what Donald Trump said about how he was going to fix the economy. And if the economy if people don't perceive it as having been fixed or more affordable, why not? And that's going to be a hard thing. Even if you say like, well, I don't agree with Donald Trump on everything, that's not going to stop Democrats from trying to latch him to you.
And I was speaking with a GOP strategist earlier this week, and she said that this really needs to be a wake-up call for Republicans because it wasn't a good week for the right. You're seeing the shutdown. You're seeing more Americans get blaming Republicans and Trump for the shutdown. You're seeing SNAP benefits being argued in court. You're seeing airlines saying, hey, we're slashing flights. You're seeing the Supreme Court hearing arguments on Trump's tariffs and the legality of them. And it didn't really look like it was going in Trump's favor based on the line of questioning there. I mean, what exactly, you see all these pieces, you see the writing on the wall. What do you do with this?
I mean, if you had a normal president, Democrat or Republican, who was like, look, I get it. You guys are going to have to, if you need to distance yourself from me to win, the most important thing is that we, maintain the House and Senate majorities. That's what most presidents do. Barack Obama did that. George W. Bush did that. Joe Biden did it to some extent. He wasn't in office for 2 terms, obviously. Donald Trump is not a normal president in that way, right? One of the reasons I think he keeps keeping the 2028 talk for himself alive, even though he's constitutionally barred from doing it, is because he's desperately afraid of being irrelevant. He wants to maintain power and centrality in politics in the Republican Party for as long as possible. If he's doing that, he can't really be like, oh, that's fine, you can throw me under the bus. And that's the issue, is like he is such an atypical leader of a party that it makes it really hard for Republicans who are trying to be practical about winning elections in next November. It makes it really hard to do.
And to that point, I don't know exactly if this is a come to Jesus moment for Republicans, but it's certainly, if you're looking at a sports angle, it's almost like it's halftime, right? Because it's halftime between the 2024 election as well as midterms. You go in, you regroup, hey, we're not doing good right now. We're down a few points. How do we shift and change strategy to win the game ultimately? I mean, does it seem like they're going to be doing that?
Well, who does it? I mean, that's the thing, right?
Exactly. Like, who's the coach?
Name 5 really influential Republicans. It's like Donald Trump occupies 4 of those 5 spots, and then we can split the last spot between Mike Johnson and John Thune, the House leader and the Senate leader. Like, he's such a dominant figure in a way that I can't remember. Maybe Obama kind of in the middle of his first term, but like, he's such a dominant figure that it's really, really hard to imagine, like, who is the guy who stands up and says, we need to do this for the good of the party? Is it J.D. Vance? No, of course not, because J.D. Vance's electoral future of running for president in 2028 is entirely tied to Donald Trump. Is it Marco Rubio? No, same thing. And then, like, the people who might do it, is Nikki Haley a big enough figure in the Republican Party at this point to stand up and be like, we need to go in a different direction? I don't think so. And, you know, I just don't see anyone who is even close to the level of Donald Trump who's going to say something like that. Say, like, hey, we need to shift strategy, which means the only person who can do it, Donald Trump, is probably the guy who just, because of who he is, isn't going to do it.
For sure. And then looking at the Democrat side, Nancy Pelosi obviously made history as the first and only female Speaker of the House. She announced she's not seeking re-election, and she's seen as the old guard of the Democratic Party. Mm-hmm. She's leaving. I mean, what do you think that this does to the future of the party? What do you think her leaving means?
Well, I mean, I think a quick word on her, which is like her or hate her, and I feel like everyone has an opinion about Nancy Pelosi. She's a remarkably successful politician. I think she will go down as one of the most effective speakers of the House in history, Republican or Democrat. Obviously, she's already in the history books, first female Speaker of the House ever. What does it mean? You know, she had stepped down from leadership a few years ago. And so they do have a group of younger leaders in place led by Hakeem Jeffries. None of those leaders have come close to the sort of level that Nancy Pelosi has. Now, obviously, she was in Congress for a long time. Most of them have not been in Congress all that long. But it is a little bit of a vacuum there. The most high-profile, powerful House member other than Nancy Pelosi is Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez right now in terms of like ability to raise money, ability to draw crowds. You know, and I don't know if she stays in the House, right? I mean, she's 36 years old. She could run for the Senate in 2028. Chuck Schumer is up for another term. She could primary him. If he retires, she could run for that seat. Or she could run for president. So look, there's a reason there's one Nancy Pelosi. It's the same thing with Mitch McConnell. Like him or hate him, there's one Mitch McConnell. They're both leaving in 2026. It's the end of an era. They are absolute political and legislative titans in Congress. And I don't think they're easily replaceable.
And then when you're looking at 2028 perhaps, and 2026, obviously we can't forget about the midterms. What specifically are you looking out for next? Obviously we have this albatross of a government shutdown, but people have short memories when it comes to shutdowns. Once that shutdown's over, it's like it almost never happened. I mean, what specifically are you looking out for next?
I mean, you're right. Like, we count the days, and if you live in the DC, Maryland, or Virginia area like I do, it's a big deal. You know people, you see people every single day are impacted by it, right? If you live in the rest of the country, I think largely you don't pay attention to it until SNAP benefits, until 10% cut in the number of flights leaving. Then it starts to spider out and impact you more. That's why I think we're probably near the end of the shutdown at this point, because you're starting to see impacts that impact a lot broader swath of the public. Is there a lingering political consequence to it? If past is prologue, not really. You know, I mean, maybe to some extent, since Republicans are in charge of everything, there may be a little bit of broad backlash of like, why can't they get the government to work? But I'm skeptical that a year from now, people have the shutdown on their mind.
And I'm sure you've had the same experience, but I have heard, listened, dissected, read so many different takes about what happened on Tuesday and the election results from then to now. Is there anything that you think is missing from the conversation, or any take that you don't think is right, is perhaps premature? What does that look like?
I think it's important to remember that this is, while I love every election and I'm an election campaign junkie, this was not a national election, right? The midterms are a national election. There are votes in every single state. This was not that. There were votes in 31 states on Tuesday. 20,000 offices were up. It's not nothing, but it is not a national election. In the same way that the midterms do not necessarily predict 2028 because the electorate's much smaller, I think we just have to be careful. Look, if I'm a Democrat today, I'm way happier than if I'm a Republican today after Tuesday. At the same time, I think it has to be a measured optimism. Nothing is guaranteed in politics. It's one of the most fascinating things about it. It's why I love covering it. Predicting what will happen a year from now, much less 3 years from now, fool's errand. So I would just say, let's wait and see about what next year holds politically and from a policy perspective, how the public response, how the economy looks in September 2026. That's probably going to tell us more about what's coming next fall than what happened on Tuesday.
And if we've learned anything in the past decade, you can't even predict what's going to happen next week. But I hope you and I can have plenty of conversations in the future. Chris, always a pleasure. Thanks so much for joining me.
Thank you. Have a good weekend. Take care.